All right, welcome back. Wider digital inclusion, we hope. So this is a YouTube video. I'm going to play the whole YouTube video. It's only 2 minutes long, I think. And I'll play the whole video. Those of y'all who are listening, you'll be able to hear it. And those of y'all who are watching, you'll be able to watch it. Because I think there's a few things that is said inside of it that we could talk about. Not really nitpick, but just kind of address because sometimes it don't make sense. So let's watch the video.
The National Digital Inclusion Survey puts persons living with disabilities, the elderly, and people living in rural communities among those most likely to fall behind in this country's thrust to digital transformation. Country representative from the Inter-American Development Bank, Karina Coburn, shared this and other statistics from the most recent survey at the launch of a technical cooperation project between the IDB, the Embassy of Japan, and the Ministry of Digital Transformation.
Only 40% of PLWDs in Trinidad and Tobago have access to the internet, compared to 79% of the general population. PLWDs are 3 times less likely to feel comfortable accessing e-government services than individuals without disabilities.
Ambassador Yutaka Musubara said Japan has invested more than $572,000 in the project.
This project is a list of many multi-sectoral initiatives financed by the Japan Special Fund, which previously provided grant assistance to the CARPHA, the Caribbean Public Health Agency, to coordinate the regional health response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
According to the IDB's Public Management Senior Sector Specialist, the project will run for the next 3 years.
Added up the populations who are elderly, who are in rural communities, and who are persons living with disabilities, in totality, that would be more than half of the population of Trinidad and Tobago.
Among the plans for expansion, a program to subsidize the cost of smartphones for the visually impaired.
In the public sector, government is working to expand the range of e-services available to customers and to improve existing services to ensure that they are universally available, easy to use, and fit for purpose to meet the needs of all members of community, regardless of economic, social, or physical circumstance.
According to the IDB data for Latin America and the Caribbean, the number of persons with disabilities is expected to grow from 88 million to 150 million by 2050. Terry Ann Brown Campbell, TTT News.
First thing, she used a term called PLWD. For those of y'all who are not too sure, that stands for people living with disabilities. I thought it was something. I was like PLWD. I was like POW, prisoner of war. All kind of thing was going through my head. I was like, what? What's that PLWD? I start thinking about PTSD and all kind of thing. But so people living with disabilities and the elderly. These are the people that they are targeting. I don't know if you ever notice how wheelchair accessibility is in Trinidad and Tobago. And usually when you're building a new building, you have to follow some codes where it must be wheelchair accessible, and there's built this big ramp in front that's snaking, making a Z and all kind of thing, and it looks like a waste of cement. But essentially, building codes require you to make sure that things are wheelchair accessible. And sometimes you might see like gaps in pavements and those sort of things, and the ramp can be a certain over a certain amount of degrees and all of that drama, right? So accessibility is something that's built into the whole ethos of building society right now. And then in phones too, accessibility features have been kind of forced on us, but both operating systems, iOS and Android, Windows, everybody, they need to have accessibility where you could get talkback and you could turn on the microphone and all those different things. What they're trying to say here is that people need to have devices and frameworks in place for them to access technology. I just not sure if the one thing that they mentioned in the video, which is to give people cell phones at a cheaper rate or subsidize, is really going to make digital inclusion any better, because I don't think we design things in such a way technologically in Trinidad catering for digital inclusion. Like I don't know.
And I mean, digital inclusion is one thing, but I think it should have some focus on digital penetration as well, because, you know, they talk about these groups, the people with disability, the elderly, and people in rural areas, right, in terms of inclusion. But people outside of that group who have access to it, yet we still have poor digital penetration, you know, people who are not elderly, in rural areas or with disabilities, you know. So it's one thing giving them access to the devices, but is the next thing to, you know, increase the whole level of digital utilization, you know, in terms of being comfortable doing things online, you know, doing online payments, filling out a form online, making it, going through a process digitally, you know, instead of everything paper-based or face-to-face. So apart from digital inclusion, we need, you know, to improve the
overall,
like
the overarching theme or plan or something like that.
Yeah, because these people probably don't have access, but if you give them access tomorrow, what's going to change? They're going to be an uptick in digital inclusion, but in which areas? You know, you have to kind of focus on, all right, they'll have access to digital, but in which areas would really make a difference in terms of moving the country forward? You know, because if you give somebody a cell phone, as you say, how that going to help? You know, and in terms of this project, you need to have things to measure. All right, you give them a cell phone, but what next, you know?
You ever turn on accessibility options on a phone for somebody or somebody who
So I actually did that.
Yeah.
At time, something happened to my phone, and like a coffee bottle fell on this phone actually.
Yeah.
And the screen was just totally damaged. Nothing was working.
Yeah.
But that's like one part of the screen was working, and I was able to turn it on, and from that, it
kind of work. Like there's a time I tried to do it has some kind of thing called a blind test, which is close your eyes and turn on accessibility and try to use your phone and just let it talk back to you and see if you could figure it out. Android at that point in time was bad at accessibility, and that could have been like 2016, 2017, somewhere around there. Apple was real good at accessibility, right? Now, of course, that changed, and both of them, the accessibility features quite good, and even to the point where some people just put it on just because it makes things easier to lock your phone and all them kind of things, right? I think that the operating systems, they have the accessibility things in place, and it makes sense. But I can't think of something that somebody who is differently able needs to do. Let's say, for example, online banking, right? Making online payments. That's what we always talk about, and that's what we want everybody to start to do and whatnot. I'm not sure if the only app I think that I interact with is the Scotiabank app and the FCB app, right? Because those are my two banks. I don't know about Republic. I don't know about RBC. I'm not sure if there is actual accessibility built into the app where you could navigate and do all the different things that you need to do without seeing it properly. I don't know if it's built in. And this reminds me of the discussion that we had with Sinead, the D-Hub winners, where she was real passionate about accessibility and design and those sort of things. I don't know if the apps that we use, let's say you want to pay a T&Tech bill, that website ain't accessible. Like that website built with some old ASP. I think it's ASP is the thing, man. Either that or not PHP is the suffix is ASPX when you go on the website.
That is .NET.
Yeah, that's .NET. Yeah, that's .NET. Yeah. Well, if your phone try to do accessibility on that, it will just try to read the screen as if it's text. And you won't know if you're on a menu and all that kind of thing. So like say you try to pay your bill with TNTech. If you try to pay with WhatsApp, worse yet. That one, the WhatsApp one does work. So you could pay your bill and thing online with that, but I don't know if it's accessible. So giving them the devices is cool, but then they'll have to be, just like how buildings had to start to get this, every developer had to start to get accessibility as part of their language and their design when they were designing houses and designing buildings and whatever. We have to get that kind of goal when we design applications if we are to be accessible. Because somewhere in that video, he say eventually half of the population will fall under that because they'll be either aged or
like what I would like to know what he used to project that. How you could project.
It could be elderly people. I think the population just aging and they get left out.
Which means it will be less. If the population aging out,
what I think he's trying to say is they're not aging out. They're aging without getting the requisite skills. So the gap just widening as they go along.
But I do agree with that. Right? Say the current elderly people, okay, but the elderly people are the next 10 or 20 years will have more exposure to technology.
Like me. 30 years from now, I'll be 60.
Well, yeah. So that statement, is like...
I guess it could be sort of sensational.
Also, if you say disabilities, then how you could project that you're going and grow a disability population, disabled population.
Yeah. That had to measure. Yeah. I
mean, I'm sure they probably have some way to do it, but I would be interested to know how you could predict that, something like that. Cause, I mean, the more years you go into the future, as you say, when I become that age, I would like to think that I'll have some type of digital literacy that I wouldn't be comparable to the elderly people today.